All right, welcome back. I hope you're having an amazing time so far. Our next speaker is Thorsten Jelinek. He is the Europe Director and Senior Fellow at Talhe Institute. Please join me in welcoming Thorsten to our virtual stage.
Great. So thank you very much for joining this presentation, for joining my presentation. Today, I want to talk about the AI governance gap. So my goal is not to provide you with templates of how to overcome that gap or to fix that gap, but actually to take a closer look and to understand more deeply what is causing the governance challenge in the AI industry. First of all, I would like to acknowledge the tremendous advancements and momentum we can see in the industry. So as we're moving from narrow to broad, not strong, but broad AI, we're also moving from a consumer and retail driven to a more enterprise and business driven AI, or we're extending towards that direction. And I think this conference here, this event highlights all these activities in the enterprise field. At the same time, we see also the competition between the United States and China. Always said that this is a head-on-head race in the transactional and informational space. And Europe also has an opportunity, or thinks has an opportunity on the operational side. So based on its capacity, manufacturing capacity and industrial capacity to actually catch up in that field. At the same time, what we have experienced actually is the rise of the AI governance challenge or discussions, and also about the ethics, which basically suggests that we kind of have a governance gap, that we are not happy with the tools, with the governance tools we're having today in order to fix the challenges of the future related to AI. And I think it's a legitimate issue because today we're already having a huge cybersecurity challenge in front of us. And AI actually builds on top of that. So here I distinguish between two risks. These are the direct AI risks and aggregated risks, and both cause that governance gap we are talking about. The direct risk, so A here in this case, as I said, relates to the existing cyber security landscape, and then AI will intensify that landscape. It will intensify existing threats and risks. It will create new ones, and they become also more precise. And also, we have different kind of accidents in front of us. So these are risks which we directly feel, which cause direct harm to institutions and to individuals. On the other hand, or this direct threat we can actually see in the in mitigation or prevention approach on a technological level. I think the Gardner figures show clearly that we have a rising and prosperous cybersecurity market, which highlights this direct threat on the AI side. At the same time, and that's B, what I refer to as an aggregated transformative risk, which we not directly feel, but which can build up. And those risks are actually more precautionary risk or uncertainties, because we cannot really specify them, but they will address, as has been discussed in public, they will address any domain of human activity. And recently also the Oxford Institute of Fundamental Risk highlighted that AI poses such risk. So these two elements, the direct risks and also aggregated risks and uncertainties, has led to, from 2017 to 2019, to kind of an explosion of AI frameworks and ethics frameworks, and also the attempt to synthesize the differences and also the challenges, and to summarize what are the key features to have a safe and secure AI. This approach already has become institutionalized. And I think here most notable is the OECD AI policy observation, which tries to track governments' activities, like soft and hard laws activities, to make AI more secure. Here, the OECD Advisory Policy Advisory Watch tracks it from the leading countries in the world, and those numbers you can see is how many programs and activities per country are running in order to implement soft laws or hard laws to deal and govern the AI challenge. I think it makes sense to look a little bit closer. What do we mean by governance? First of all, governance is the possibility to collaborate. It's a way of political interference, but it should be a possibility to collaborate under common principles in order to maximize the benefits and to minimize the risks. However, there is a value conflict here. It's between autonomy and self-guidance and security and restrictions. And the stakeholders, you can kind of map on that continuum. The continuum can be more specific. On the autonomy side, we have maybe a kind of a soft governance, which allows for innovation, experimentation, and there's probably hardly no restriction, to a hard governance, and which the hardest here would be an outright ban, which doesn't allow certain applications. And in between, we have self-regulation, we have regulatory experimentation standards, and laws and regulations. However, there is a different interpretation of governance. We're facing a governance gap and we try to fix it. And the way to fix it depends also on your political and cultural system, historical background. So I think when we take these big regions here, the United States, Europe, and China, we have different approaches to fix that gap. But we have kind of a convergence or similar challenge to that governance gap. The gap is a global gap, but we fix it in different ways. When we look to Europe more closely, Europe in that digitalization challenge, it was first and foremost a way to move from a single market to a single digital market. I think that's the utmost challenge or a goal of the European Union, to create a trusted single digital market, which is trying to achieve that. But we see also alongside the other domains of policy, like the single market, home affairs, defense, security, and foreign affairs, that we have on the cyberspace, the digitalization, a kind of an integration. And while first the single digital market as first priority, we move more and more into security matters as well, enforcement matters, etc., in order to create a trusted environment for those new technologies, including AI, to flourish. And actually, if you look at the landscape, the regulatory landscape, so we're zooming in into the governance gap, and here we are on the hard governance side. And here you see the various laws and regulations that have been put in place from a cybersecurity perspective. The NIST directive, which primarily looks at the network and information security, was the first law, and probably the GDPR is much more known. And now this year, we had coming the AI Act proposal, which tries to regulate the application of AI. And this AI Act proposal basically takes a precautionary risk approach towards the usage of AI. So some applications will be classified as high risk, and they will be regulated, and you need to be assessed and certified. There will be applications like social scoring, which will be banned, and then there's a majority of low and no risk applications. Generally, there is a trend towards more transparency and observation in order to increase the trust in AI, but also to make it secure for the users. And some countries has already moved forward, and this is an example of the German Federal Office for Information Security. They just released in February this year a compliance criteria catalog, and you see the compliance areas are kind of similar to those AI frameworks, principal frameworks we have seen. And within that catalog, and NIST has also released this in June this year, a specific compliance catalog for the issue of bias. Here you have to though consider that those catalogs do not judge really about the human biases of discrimination, but they say you have to take care. So there's no judgment about whether a bias is good or bad, but it is a catalog and a way to analyze the AI application that the provider of those services is aware of that and mitigates the risks. So basically, we face the common challenge. We have on the left side those laudable and important principles, and we have existing ICT functions and processes. On the right side, we have the AI lifecycle, which is emerging, and many companies and organizations are still only on a use case basis and grappling how they can make use of that. How can they create efficiencies, productivity, and even grow the business? So on both sides are actually often not in sync. This is where you have a clear gap between the principles and the operations. So on the other hand, you have also recommendations of how to move things together. So responsible AI basically responds to your different stakeholders, and it's ingrained in your operations and in your organizational structure and aligned with the company's vision and mission. And also, you look at each step of the AI life cycle and try to make it traceable, explicable, and recently there's of course a strong focus on the human bias and privacy issue. But we should also be, while those developments are happening, which are laudable, we should also keep in mind that bias and privacy concerns cannot simply be eradicated from an AI model. Privacy, for example, data revocation, so the deletion of private data in neural networks is almost not possible. Also, the distributed learning often violates with informed consent, and differential privacy cannot yet be effectively enacted with AI models. So there's certainly a lot of engineering challenges to comply to the principles. On the other hand, there are so many biases, and psychologists identified at least 180. What actually does it mean if once we have a bias-free AI running, considering that actually subjectivity, which causes those biases, is also the experience of autonomy and freedom. So when we have no biases anymore, what does a society, in which direction does a society turn? Will be actually more equal on the one hand, but we could also turn into kind of emotionalist, like automata, without any emotion, without any subjectivity. So when you look at the general sentiment, there is a move from the initial technology optimism to a technology realism, or let's say a precautionary optimism. The initial focus on problem solving, which is an engineering focus, has also moved into a little bit of a awareness of the dilemma we are facing with applications, and where we have competing goals, and we try now more also to optimize those dilemmas. However, a dilemma is a moral dilemma which cannot be resolved. Otherwise, it wouldn't be a dilemma. And that means actually to resolve or to make a decision for one goal over the other goal. I think we are not there that a machine can do that, because it requires legitimacy and it requires responsibility. So here in this dilemma optimization, I think AI can augment human decision making, but it cannot replace that. So let's come back a little bit to the country and regional level concerning governance. What we actually see here is a intervention of governments into markets, into technology of historical proportions. The FT said we have a renaissance of industrial policy. That means the belief that individuals, the markets will just sort out the AI governance gap. There is no much trust in that. So in the EU side, we have different programs like Fit for the Digital Age, the Green Deal. In the United States, we have the Innovation and Competition Act. We have now just released the infrastructure package. Those are all multi-billion-dollar basically intervention packages. So to guide the markets, to guide human behavior, and this is of historical proportion. And actually, liberals will maybe be against that, but there is a certain understandability here, because the last 30 years of globalization have weakened the national sovereignty. So globalization, the dynamics of globalization have weakened national politics, basically. And now we have kind of this approach to regain that sovereignty, which the EU in particular, but it's not just the EU matter, which is called digital and technology sovereignty. So actually, those big blocs want to regain the power over their political decision making. The risk is, of course, that we run into a protectionism and even into a nationalism. Cooperation is needed. And actually, what we are facing, however, in the cybersecurity or cyber and AI field is a fragmentation of institutions. And the fragmentation or even a balkanization undermines collaboration. So in concluding my presentation, I want to make some or share some more fundamental thoughts about this AI governance gap. I think the AI governance gap is not something we can just overcome. I think it is a gap which will stay with us. It cannot be just surmounted, and we cannot just move to the right side of the future to have fully responsible AI. That means that the dual use challenge is something not of a simple choice. So the dual use will continue to exist because it's the historical trajectory which makes that the uses of AI applications defines its basically its tendency. And there are two fundamental processes which undermine or which sustain that gap. One is the scientific drive. The other one is this capitalist spirit. The scientific drive, and that's very important, is the most dominant force in humanity, and even before capitalism was invented. So science basically is a fundamental language of creating objectivity. It's a dialectic of hypothesis and verification. We don't know any other method or language which can create more objectivity. So we cannot just abandon science or technoscience for that matter, because it creates that objectivity. And what's happening now, that AI is taking a hold on it. So it's automating that scientific drive, which always distinguished us. And the second one is what I call here this capitalist spirit, the premise of profit. Usually the capitalist spirit tends to override any other human value, and also any normative claims made by AI principles. So the capitalist spirit is restless, but the problem is it has no intrinsic ethic for social or environmental good. So when AI couples or joins up with that drive, it becomes self-directed. So we need intervention. And likewise, technology has no intrinsic spirit or intrinsic ethic for social good and for environmental good. But when it is used, it changes power relations and opportunities. It creates good or harm, but it does not just simply guarantee social good. So what we'll be experiencing here, like what we experienced with greenwashing, we experience for sure an AI ethics washing. Simply the fact that the scientific drive with the capitalist spirits override some of the laudable values and ethics people have put forward. And I think this we should keep in mind when we look at governance models, when we implement them, that we have to keep in mind that we can simply overcome the dual use nature of AI, and also the potential side effects AI will have. So that's it, and thank you very much for listening. Thank you.
Wow, Thorsten, thank you so much for sharing. That was amazing. And I know this virtual audience is giving you a huge virtual round of applause. We really appreciate your time today. For the audience, it's time for you to make your way to your next session. Along the way, make sure you accept your connection request and take some time to check out our amazing exhibits. Thanks so much, and we'll see you around.